back with another episode of the Nothing's Ever Easy King's Information Network podcast. We are up to chapter 31, which means we are in the last 10 chapters of the book. Hard to imagine, but here we go. Chapter 31. Reese didn't immediately call me in again and reinitiate regular interrogations, much to my surprise. I suppose I should have known it meant serious trouble was brewing, but none of us realized. I visited his office again, but he seemed distracted at best, and he asked questions without being disturbed by my lack of straight answer. He did continue to inquire about Colin, well, seemingly searching for something specific, but I answered truthfully and couldn't make heads nor tails of his interest. He seemed to know Colin's fate, but trying to get it out of him was like talking to a brick wall. When he called Jay, things went in much the same manner. At that, I did start to feel a stirring of nerves. I didn't think his distraction boded well in the long run. I could only hope he was just busy with rebuilding, but my gut told me that was too much to hope for. I could tell Jay felt the same, but we didn't dare talk about it, not wanting to spook Stella or Dave. Then, one morning, Dayton and the Brutes appeared outside the cell. Shorty wore a shit-eating grin that could mean nothing good. "Morning, everyone," he said brightly, as he opened the cell. I should have known then. It was the first time our jailers had openly acknowledged our cellmates. "Who do you want today?" Jay said wearily, standing. "Not you or Jasmine," he said gleefully. It took far too long for that to sink in. "No," Jay and I said, almost in concert. Dave shrunk back against Stella, and she went white. "The Colonel would like to talk to you two," he said, gesturing at the Harpers. "So let's go, before Kilger and Juke have to make you." So Reese had finally gotten smart enough to question them. My nerves flared sharply. If they asked the right questions, or scared Dave enough, we could be in some trouble. They would certainly know a hell of a lot more than they did now. At least we hadn't told them any details of Beau's master plan. Although we'd mentioned that there would be others in Greensward at some point, we hadn't gotten into the details beyond it being Jesse and Rye. While my mind whirled, Stella took Dave's hand tightly and marched out the door, chin held high. I silently applauded. She'd never asked for any of this. Dayton led the way, while the Brutes, not touching them yet, followed. As soon as their footsteps faded, Jay and I looked at each other. Shit. You can say that again. I hope... He bit his lip. I agreed with him. I hoped Stella wouldn't try and fight it. I hoped they answered the questions while giving away as little information as possible. I hoped that Reese would be above hurting a child. I hoped there was some sort of reasonable explanation. And I hoped, above all else, that they would be returned to us, even if it wasn't whole. Jay paced as I stood by the door clutching the bars. Neither of us said another word until I spotted Dayton and the Brutes coming our way alone. My stomach dropped, heart skipping a beat. That meant one of two things. One was bad, but bearable. The other... I backed up. "Jay," I croaked. He stopped dead and turned to face the door. The trio reached us. Dayton's grin had grown. "Let's go, you two." "Where are Stella and David?" Jay demanded. "Otherwise occupied. You'll see them soon. Let's go, before they make you or decide to take it out on the boy." So we were going with bad, but bearable. I exchanged a look with Jay and stepped forward. He was right behind, and the Brutes closed ranks. Shorty led us to Reese's office and held open the door. I stepped in, and my breath hitched. Things had potentially just descended past bearable. Once again leaning against the desk, Vladimir Oplin watched us with an almost feral gleam in his eye. Immediately, I could tell something had changed with him, even in less than a month. It wasn't a good change, and my skin crawled. Even worse, though, a new man stood near the window, watching us curiously. A new man, with the same blue eyes and a definite family resemblance. It could only be Sorin Dacamar. That scared me. While Oplin was clearly dangerous in a physical way, Dacamar was known for his intelligence and ability to outthink others. No matter how I added things up, it was not a pleasant equation. "Jasmine, what a pleasure to see you again. It's time for us to get some serious answers." Vladimir stepped into my space as one of the Brutes held tightly to my arms. The other secured Jay, who watched warily. "You and your friend Jay will give us those answers now. So please, follow me." Kilgore dragged Jay out of the room, and Juke followed with me. Reese, Oplin, and Dacamar trailed us. At the first intersection, Kilgore pulled Jay away from us. Dacamar followed him, while Oplin slid in front of us, and led the way to a part of the prison I hadn't been into before. Finally, he stopped at a door and pushed it open. "After you, Jasmine." Juke pushed me in, and I stumbled to a dead stop. Even expecting it, to see Dave being held not 10 feet away with a knife to his throat came as a shock to my system. The boy stood rigid, clearly petrified past the point of tears. Juke pushed me in further, then stepped back, not holding me, but standing with an easy grip. "Here's the deal," Oplin said, voice oily. "Reese mentioned that you appear to be very chummy with your cellmates. You answer our questions truthfully, the boy lives. If you don't," he shrugged, "we'll be checking your answers against those of James to ensure that neither of you are trying to sneak falsehoods past us. But you wouldn't do that with the boy's life on the line, would you?" I was going to have to try. This was far worse than them asking Dave and Stella the questions. This gave us no time to prepare. I had to trust that Jay and I thought enough alike. usually a scary prospect, to pull this off without anyone dying and without giving anything of dire importance away. I tried pleading anyway. Let the kid go. He has nothing to do with this. He now has everything to do with this. You've made him so important, everything might hinge on that boy's life. And that's on you. I ground my teeth and caught Dave's eye, trying to look reassuring. Then I looked past him to where Reese lurked by the doorway, and I thought you were a bastard. He smiled faintly, but without his usual smugness. Oakland didn't waste time. Are you part of the Freedom Fighters? Yes. We'd already established that. I had no problem confirming it again at this point. And who is the leader? I hesitated just long enough. Oakland raised his hand. Bo, I said, before he could complete the motion. Is he the son of the former king? You mean like a prince? I said, hoping I sounded the right mix of startled and incredulous. I suspected I did. I didn't know if he or Dacamar knew Prince Rainier had a brother. I still wasn't entirely sure how Rainier himself knew, given what Bo had told me. Yes, like a prince, he said, sounding annoyed. I eyed him. The king only had Rainier before the queen died, I told him, knowing I was pushing it, but unable to help it. That's not what I asked. Bo is Bo, I said with a shrug. If he is, that's pretty cool. You'd hate that, though, wouldn't you? I mean, another claimant to the throne, and not one not in your clutches. Now I was really pushing it. He raised his hand. Okay, I said hastily. I'm sorry. I'll stop. Where are you based from? He asked, expression stony. But my deflection had succeeded in keeping him from realizing I'd never directly answered his question. No lie yet. Not that it would do me or Dave much good if he got wind of it. North, mostly. Up in the hills. There was nothing they didn't know already either, considering the Battle of Deepin's Crossing and the more recent ambush. I want specifics, Jasmine. That's about as specific as I can get. We don't want to be detected by your men, so things are vague. But you came from there, so surely you could get yourself back. Of course I could. It wasn't stupid, just ballsy. But by now, they'd know we were captured, so they would not be stupid enough to allow us the opportunity to be pushed into leading you there. I was on a roll. I think you're lying. Then test me against Jay like you said you would. You'll find his answer similar. At least, I hope so. If anyone was good at deflection and misdirection, it was a doll, and their ability to talk you in circles without you ever realizing it. And what did you hope to accomplish here in Greensward? I smirked, because I had to, even if I was aware of Dave and his guard. To make things go boom. That answer would probably be verbatim to Jay's. Don't get cute. I'm not getting cute, I retorted. He hauled off and backhanded me hard enough across the face that I saw stars and could taste blood at the corner of my mouth. I shook my head dazedly, waiting for my vision to clear. I said, do not get cute, I glared. How did you survive? I can't believe that after all the planning I put into your demise, that you lived. This was a question that had to have been eating at him for weeks, ever since he'd learned I was alive. When the second round of blasts went off, I was flung from my horse down into the ravine that ran along the road at that stretch. No one thought to check down there until Bo and the Freedom Fighters arrived. He studied me through narrowed eyes before nodding. And were you part of the group Jackson caught outside West Corner? Yes. That didn't deserve an explanation unless he specifically asked for it. You're doing well enough so far, he said, as if the verbal pat on the back would make me feel better or something. What's the plan? Which one? He immediately raised his hand threateningly. At that point, I wasn't sure if he would order Dave killed, hit me, or both. I didn't relish any of the possibilities. No, I mean it. Which one? How many do you know? He asked, sounding honestly curious. Quite a few, but the vast majority are over and done with, and we succeeded. I didn't bother smirking this time. Enough of my smugness had shifted into my words to convey it nicely. The ambush? Of course. Bo and I did most of the planning for that. Went off without a hitch, too. Your soldiers ran scared. Do not get cute. Actually, those are facts, I retorted coldly. By now, Dave had silent tears streaming down his face, breathing shallow and fast. What else do you want to know? That's rather rude of you. Abrupt. It's abrupt of me, I corrected as patiently as I could. Reese snorted. I started, gaze shooting to him. I'd almost forgotten he was present in my concentration not to slip up with Oakland. Very clever, Jasmine. I've already come to expect as much. And how about the main plan? The one in progress right now? Not much. That was pretty much a bald-faced lie, but my first. His hand inched up. Do not play games. I knew our part and everything that happened before we came here. And what else? The idiot didn't even ask about the things that happened before, half of which he had no idea about. I know there will be others coming to Greensward, or maybe they're already here. It's hard to keep track of time down here. Who? He asked, ignoring the rest. No idea. Whoever ended up fitting the job, which has probably changed since our capture. Another lie. Ryan and Jesse had been pegged for that job since before Jay and I had gotten to sign the first part, although the job had probably changed to include some sort of a serious attempt to free us. He tapped his chin, actually walking a complete circuit around me. I stood very still. Unfortunately, he said finally, I suspect you're right. I didn't let the relief show on my face. I think you know by now I wouldn't risk David's life by lying to you, I said coldly. What are the jobs of the other groups in Greensward? The only one I know for certain was our support group, but they left ages ago, after we got caught. Another half-truth. Adam and Ursula had left after our capture, but not because of it, but because of Jackson McRose and a certain letter. So you know nothing of value, he said more to himself than anything, sounding disappointed. If he wanted to leap to that conclusion, far be it from me to stop him. He shot off a couple more easily deflected questions, not even seeming to try any more. He appraised me one last time. Very well, let's see what Sorin has to say, Reese, he said. Keep her here, Juke. Immediately the brute stepped up and grabbed my arms. I didn't try and move, watching Dave out of the corner of my eye. His guard lowered the knife, but kept a tight grip on him as Opalyn and Reese left. The wait seemed to last forever. I didn't even dare scratch an itch, not sure how quickly they might overreact to any motion. Finally, Opalyn returned, still trailed by Reese. I could get nothing from Opalyn's face, although I tried desperately to get a reading. But when my eyes darted past him to Reese, I felt myself relax. It was clear from his expression that Jay and I had managed it. Let go of the boy, Opalyn ordered. Dave immediately rushed to me. I twisted out of Juke's slack grip and hugged the boy tightly. You're okay, Dave, you're okay, I murmured, rubbing his back as he sobbed, as much out of relief as fear probably. Opalyn said nothing until Dave finally started to calm down, wiping his eyes. Now kill him. What? I exploded, pulling Dave back close to my side. You can't! That's not how you said this worked. He's an innocent child! My eyes flicked to Reese, just long enough to ascertain that this was much a surprise to him as to me. Jez? Dave said shakily. I pushed him behind me, backing towards the wall, my hands held up defensively. Don't do this, Opalyn. We told you the truth. But not enough. It's not our fault we don't know the answers. He held my gaze evenly, smile riding to a predatory grin that sent a shiver down my spine. Then you need to give me more. I took another step back, feeling Dave hit the wall. Then ask what you want, Opalyn, I said, but my voice shook. I have asked the agreed questions. Now I just need information. Whatever you have. To save the boy? His voice was so mild, despite what he was insinuating. I couldn't just say an outright no to that, but there had to be another way out of this. There just had to. Most of it is old news, I said desperately, racking my brain for something that would slow him down. I shot a pleading glance towards Reese, but the colonel had disappeared. My heart thudded in my chest. The two brutes were almost upon us when a fresh voice cut across the room. Vladimir. Cold, but icy, it froze everyone, myself included. Sorin Dacamar stood in the doorway, fury etched plainly on his face. What in the name of the gods are you doing? I'm doing it my way. Leave it alone, Sorin. I'll be done soon. No, you're not. This isn't your way, he said flatly. Colonel Reese, please escort both prisoners back to their cell. Startled, my gaze jumped and found Reese standing exactly where I'd last seen him, like he'd never left. Did Opalyn even know he had? You do not give the orders, Opalyn snapped. I do when you're out of control, Sorin retorted. Let me take the boy, Reese interjected smoothly. His purpose, at least, has been served, yes? Opalyn's jaw worked, but he didn't disagree as Reese came over. Let me take him, Jez, he murmured. I squeezed Dave's hands. Go with Reese. But, he started weakly. Go, please. You'll be safe with Stella and Jay. In a matter of speaking, certainly safer. I ruffled his hair affectionately. He swallowed, but allowed Reese to stare him out of the room without another word. I turned back to the brothers. Their voices had lowered so I couldn't hear the words, but the looks on their face told me it was still heated. Juke and the other guard hovered near me in obvious indecision. I stayed very still, so as not to give them an excuse. Finally, face like thunder, Opalyn turned to me. Grab her. I don't want her to be able to stand on her own when you're done with her. As unpleasant as this was going to be, I vastly preferred it over the alternative. They did as ordered with relish, just as Reese slid back into the room. Please be cautious of her arms. They've just healed, and I'd hate to deal with all of that again. And don't break the cast. Opalyn snorted. I was pretty sure he didn't care if they did. I still wasn't sure why Reese did, at least past the point of me being coherent and functional enough to take some pain. Colonel, come with me, Opalyn said, and swept from the room. Dacamar, though, didn't move right away. Eyes locked on me. I couldn't get any read off him. In that, at least, the brothers were very much alike. Then he stepped forward and waved the guards off. There are some orders I cannot, and perhaps should not, countermand. I said nothing, not sure what he was getting at. Sometimes, he continued, it's best to let things happen as they will, and do your best to pick up the pieces afterwards. Do you understand? I nodded slowly. Good. Strangely, he smiled. I think you'll be all right. Thanks for the vote of confidence? He patted me lightly on the cheek. Sarcasm doesn't suit you any more than it suits Rainier, he said, like this was a normal conversation. You and Jay aren't easy to crack. I know you're both lying. About what? I asked, curious if he'd actually picked up on the lie. You absolutely know the rest of Bow Highcastle's plan to take back Tira. Prove it, I retorted. To my incredible surprise, he actually grinned for a split second. It's just the thing. I can't. Despite having no warning, you and Jay managed to successfully lie the same way under serious pressure. I'll admit, I'm very impressed. So, you get a pass for now. Thanks, I think. We'll leave you to Reese. Eventually he'll get through both of you. Now it was my turn to grin. Not in time, he won't. We'll see, he said, not seeming overly concerned. He stepped back and turned to the guards. Follow your orders. He fixed his gaze on Dave's guard. But keep that knife sheathed. I want no blood from cuts, understand? He asked coldly. Yes, sir, the guard said. He left, shutting the door behind them. Juke grinned as he and the other guard closed in. They fulfilled their orders to the letter. Juke had to drag me back to the cell because my legs were jelly and my head spun. My shoulders felt fine. He shoved me in, Jay catching me and helping me to my corner. Dave immediately sprung on me with a tight hug. I returned it, just glad to see all three of them safe. Jez, I want to say thank you, Stella said, twisting her hands nervously. David told us. Stella, there was nothing you could do about it. I'm just glad I could. Although, weirdly, it's Dacamar we have to thank. And the fact that Jay and I can think scarily alike in a pinch, apparently. Still, I owe you, she said quietly, shooting me a grateful smile. Then, Jay opened his mouth, and, as usual, talk turned to lighter matters. It didn't take Riley long to come to despise Greensward. She'd avoided cities for a long time after her childhood growing up in the streets, and wasn't thrilled to be back in one now, especially this one. She figured she should try and get used to it, though, considering that when they'd won, they'd all be based out of Oakbridge. Part of the lack of appeal for Greensward, too, she admitted to herself, was the sheer number of soldiers. They made her itchy and anxious. About a week after their arrival, she was hurrying back to the Blue Parrot, wanting to tell Jessie about the modifications to the shift change at the garrison, when she bumped into someone quite by accident. I'm sorry, she said, pivoting to go around, but a hand clamped on her arm, not tightly, more like the person she'd hit was steadying themselves. Still, she looked up with a polite smile, a thrill of nerves running through her. Despite the fact she hadn't seen the man in a solid 6 months, and then their meeting had been brief, she knew him immediately, and her heart plummeted. She looked away, but not quickly enough, as Jackson McGroth's eyes widened. Rylia? Her mind froze to the point where no sound would pass her lips. What in the name of the gods are you doing here? He hissed. Don't you realize it's dangerous? Been okay so far, she said automatically. Let go of me. No. The panic swelled. McGroth, let go of me now. No. She wouldn't lose her head. I kicked your ass once. I'm not afraid to do it again. I wouldn't suggest it in this crowd, he said, sounding almost amused, the bastard. I'll take my chances. Let go. To her everlasting surprise, he did. They're still alive. What? She asked, forgetting to back away. Your friends, Jez and Jay. How do you know? She began, but eyed him. Did this mean he was willing to give her information? They still hadn't met Kira's boyfriend, who apparently avoided the end most of the time because the soldiers made fun of him for being slow. I want to talk. Then talk. Not here, he said, almost exasperated. It's far too open. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, stepping back. He raised his hand like he might grab her again, but restrained himself at the last second, dropping it without contact. We'll go somewhere public. You can pick. Oh, for the sake of the gods, Jaxie, just call the police already and have me arrested, since you don't seem to have the balls to do it yourself. I don't want to have you arrested, he said, startled, and don't call me Jaxie. I've finally gotten Annie to stop. Both parts of that statement got her attention. What? Don't call me Jaxie. Yeah, I got that. I was a little more curious about the not wanting to have me arrested part. She poked him in the chest and then pointed at herself. Different sides, remember? Don't think that could slip your mind so quickly. Do you want me to arrest you? I assume you want to rescue Jez and Jay, but really not the way to go about it. Reese's, it's not the way to go about it. That didn't sound like it boded well for her friend's safety. He continued, and Master Vladimir and Mr. Sorin here, it's just not a good idea. This time, Rai grabbed his arm and pulled him towards the nearest inn. She heard a lot of titles for Opalyn and Dacamar since their rise to power, but those two, and with that familiarity, were new. To his credit, Jackson didn't fight or grip, just hopping twice to keep his balance, then falling in step next to her, looking vaguely offended. He took in the inn's clientele quickly, was glad to see it was a good mix. Jackson nodded politely to the few other soldiers as Rai headed for a quiet table towards the back. Only once they reached it did she let go of him and slide into a seat. He sat down across from her. Are you insane? She demanded quietly. He actually gave that due thought. It's possible, he said finally, slumping back in his seat as the waiter came to take an order. Do you want lunch? Jackson asked her politely. Are we going to talk that long? She countered. He shrugged and ordered an ale and one of their house specials. After a moment of studying him, she ordered water and one of the specials, too. When the waiter left, Jackson looked at her. What are you doing here? Do you seriously expect me to answer that? It's more than just rescuing your friends, isn't it? She regarded him levelly, but said nothing. He sighed. Look, I was the reason your other two had to leave. Her eyes narrowed. Adam and Ursula had made their way back to Cavern Hall because of a letter to Beau. Oh? She asked, not wanting to accidentally give away any information. Because of the letter. The letter to Beau Highcastle from his brother. You sent the letter? She said slowly. Well, Annie asked me to, and I do most things that Annie asks for. Why's that? He shrugged. It's Annie. That explains exactly nothing. He thanked the waiter as he returned and took a sip of his ale contemplatively. When I was 14, Annie and Master Vlad took me in, out of Holly, and gave me a job. Some job, Rye scoffed. No, I worked for the family business in Alexandria and got to complete my schooling. It really was pretty good. Annie's the best. She studied him. Are you an orphan, or did your parents ditch you? Orphan, but I think that also qualifies as them ditching me, he said with a crooked smile. They died when I was 9 during an alien raid. Then I got sent to Holly until Master Vladimir found me. And then he dragged you into a war. Real nice of him, shortening your lifespan like that. Jackson's expression flickered. Things happen, he said. You can't say your reasons for joining the Freedom Fighter are all that different from mine. It hadn't been out of sense of loyalty at first, no. She hadn't understood anything about the politics when she'd been unintentionally recruited, but now it was. Maybe she did understand. No, I guess I can't, she said. So you knew them before. Before the takeover, yes, but not before the planning. Master Vladimir was already knee-deep in that before I ever came. It worked, though. Then he wasn't home much, which was okay with Annie and me. What about Dagmar? I met him a couple times, but he didn't move in until a lot further on. He tried to protect me, he said a bit wistfully, but I was stupid and didn't listen, and then after, it was too late. After? Unfortunately, the waiter chose then to return with their food, and Jackson seemed to jerk back to the present, setting to his food almost immediately. Rye didn't push him, eating in silence until they'd both made a significant dent in the meal. You said something about Opalyn and Dagmar being here? He nodded, swallowing. They're questioning your friends today. Mr. Sorin came up with a plan to try and catch them up. Did it work? He smiled slightly. I don't know. I've been on duty all morning. I'm supposed to meet them at the palace after lunch. We don't seem to be after you, though, so my guess is it didn't work. Maybe they just don't know about us. I sincerely doubt that, he said. I doubt that because there were 5 of you in West Corner. One of them was Beau Highcastle, and 2 of them were James and Jasmine. And what does that have to do with whether or not they know we're here? We? Us? He said mildly. Rye cursed herself and shot him a nasty glare. What do you want? I've come to the private conclusion that the group of you were some of the top people in the Freedom Fighters. For obvious reasons, I haven't shared that information. Mr. Opalyn would probably skin me alive if he knew I'd let the secret Highcastle slip through my fingers. He was pissed enough as it was. You did kind of screw it up. I misjudged, he said, but I suppose it can happen to the best of us. Which reminds me, how's your back? And your hand? Instinctively, she itched at her palm. Fine. Small scars, but nothing serious. No loss of motion. She felt no little surprise that he remembered. I would have thought that you might have preferred if it crippled me. If I wanted you crippled, I wouldn't have chatted with you when we just ran into each other. I don't wish you personal ill, he said, reaching out, taking her hand and folding it open to expose the long, thin scar that ran down the palm. Rye's breath caught at the gentle touch. You're insane, she muttered. He grinned, letting go and looking up. Maybe, but you don't owe me a little gratitude. I didn't tell them your name, didn't give them anything to look up, or that I knew for a fact that Jez and Jay were freedom fighters, although they know now. And, as I said, I didn't tell them about Beau Highcastle. Why not? She demanded. It was too embarrassing to admit I was beaten by a teenage girl. His delivery was too smooth for her to buy that, though. There were far too many other soldiers there who witnessed it for me to buy that. Someone had to have told. Events were recorded in our report, but they didn't want to look too bad either, so certain things were glossed over. She snorted. Then why didn't you tell, if you owe them your loyalty? Mr. Sorin didn't ask. What about Opalyn? He shrugged. He never specifically asked either. She pressed her lips together and studied him thoughtfully. Sounds like maybe it'd be okay if you just disappeared. Maybe. But it's a little late for that, he said, swirling the last of his gravy into his potatoes. And you're sure Jez and Jay are okay? I was until today. Not in completely one piece. Jess had issues with her arms last time I saw her, but Reese has repeatedly expressed his frustration that no methods are really working on them. But Mr. Sorin's different, and his methods might have worked. What was he trying? Jackson briefly outlined the idea of using their cellmates. That's awful, Rye burst, using a little boy like that. Mr. Sorin wouldn't actually let him get hurt, he said defensively. You say that, and yet the poor kid's been in jail for over a month. God's breath, you people really are horrible. He frowned. I would do something about it if I could, he snapped. It wasn't that long ago I was his age. Then you're a fat lot of good. I have absolutely nothing to do with the jail and how it's run. I'm only a lieutenant. He actually looked a little hurt by her accusations. Reese is a colonel. The point still stands, she said flatly, not letting herself be swayed by his pathetic look. Using children is never acceptable. What if the man in charge of him slips, or is a giant asshole, or someone changes the rules on your Mr. Sorin? Jackson's frown deepened. He wouldn't let them. If Oakland took you in, why does it seem like you... She paused, unable to come up with the proper word. Well, didn't seem quite right, although maybe. Like was definitely not it. Trusted, maybe? Because Annie and Mr. Sorin are the only two who tried to keep me out. I didn't listen, but that's not their fault, he said quietly, fiddling with his fork, eyes firmly on the table in front of him. God's damn it all, stop making me feel bad for you, she snapped. The shithead had the gall to smile. That wasn't my goal. It just seems to keep coming back to me. He looked up, something almost sly in his eyes, along with the pathetic sorrow. We could talk about you instead. She had to fight a smile. That hadn't even been any kind of subtle. Or we could not. She scooped up the last of the potatoes to cover any expression that might have snuck out. I should probably get going. I have to meet my we. She reached for her coin bag, but he waved her off. I'm sure you came amply prepared, but I'm the one who insisted on the talk, he said. I'll get lunch. She wasn't going to fight it. She would also never tell her friends. In fact, maybe the whole lunch part could be admitted entirely. I'm not in your debt. Of course not, he said with a wry smile. I wouldn't dream of such a thing, or imply it. Rye nodded and stood, but he reached out a hand and gently caught her arm. It won't be easy getting them out. You'll need to have a foolproof plan. Reese isn't taking any chances, since they're the first definite freedom fighters we've caught. At her nod, he let go, but wasn't quite finished. Good luck. Mind reeling, Rye all but bolted from the inn. Annie watched Wren sleep, a favorite secret pastime ever since he mentioned that her brothers had promised him she wouldn't. She didn't think Wren would really mind, as long as she wasn't a total creep about it. She smiled, just as he began to fidget, squirming and whining deep in his throat. She'd seen enough nightmares and had enough of them too. She went to stand, to shake him awake, but found she couldn't move. Panic started to swell. She had to wake him up, help protect him. Her Wren shouldn't have nightmares. I have to kill him. He'd messed with her. It can't be allowed to continue. The voice itself wasn't familiar, but the words held a known flavor. She screamed, but no sound came out, struggling vainly against the invisible force that held her down. A shining sword appeared over Wren's bed, extra bright in the darkness. It hovered over his heart. Struggling ever more frantically, she watched it descend, horrified. Annie? Annie! Anika, wake up! She lashed out towards the voice, but something wrapped around her arms. Her eyes shot open, blinking blearily up at her room. Calm down. It's okay. You're okay. She'd know that voice anywhere. Just a nightmare. That's all. She pulled her arm away as she went to sit up, and he let her. What? Sorin smiled a little. She hadn't even known he and Vlad were back from Greensward. Good. You're awake. He stood and headed for the door. See you in the morning. He'd almost reached it before his presence sunk in. Sorin, wait, she called as his hand reached the doorknob. Yes? Why, what are you doing here? She asked. He shrugged without turning. I've always known when you're having a nightmare. Tonight was no different. She stared at his back. Part of her knew that, or at least she knew that he'd used to. Why aren't you sleeping? Couldn't. He shrugged again. Do you think Vlad's losing it? Now he half-turned. Look, you should try and get some more sleep. Sorin, she snapped, angrier at the dismissal than she expected. Don't do that. Don't treat me like a child. Do you think Vlad's losing it? He pressed his lips together and came back over, perching on the edge of her bed. He still looked like he might flee at any moment. I do. So do I, she said softly, catching his eye. As they sat there, something flickered in Sorin's eyes. Annie, he began. Yeah? She prompted when he didn't immediately continue. Still, he hesitated another minute before nodding decisively. There's something I need to tell you. Besides the fact you were married, she said lightly, but his expression didn't lighten. Yes, more important than that. He took a deep breath. While I was married, Diana and I had a son, Dean. Her eyes widened. What? She started, but then didn't know how to continue. If he had a son, her nephew, then where was he now? Her initial conclusion she didn't like at all. Had he died, along with his wife? If so, how was Sorin still standing? He's still alive, he said hastily, allaying those fears. The doctor said that Diana's illness wasn't contagious. He's almost 5 now, and lives with Diana's parents in the next town over from where we lived. Do you have any contact with them? She asked. Sorin never left enough to actually go visit. The little town, he told her, was a full day's ride away. He shook his head, shifting to sit more firmly on the bed. No, I don't dare. If the freedom fighters or any number of other people or groups found out, if Vlad found out, he tapped a tight fist against his thigh. No, it's safer for him if no one knows he exists. Then he can safely stay out of the fray and grow up without my legacy hanging over his head. If he's 4 now, then he was just a toddler when you left. Yes, tiny and pudgy with our eyes and a large vocabulary for his age, or so I was told. He smiled a little. He was the most curious human being I'd ever met. But I couldn't raise a child on my own. What do I know about children? Vlad had already been bugging me for months to join in his crusade, and I knew Cedric and Anna would do a much better job raising him than I ever could. I'm not sure you give yourself enough credit, Annie said, although she had seen him when he returned, and how wrecked he had been. Maybe, at that point, he couldn't. And that, in turn, had robbed little Dean of ever having parents of his own. That stung. Not that Sorin had kept the secret, she could see the logic in that, but that she'd never get to know their family's future. A child who could, and would, not be like them. Who could step outside the family legacy and be better. Dean's better off with his grandparents, he said, almost as if he was still trying to convince himself. Now? Yes, definitely. This is no place for a kid. It's barely a place for us or Jax, she said quietly, then leaned forward and hugged him tightly. Thank you for trusting me. No one will hear it from me. I wish I could have met him. I'm sorry you didn't. I think you would have adored him. No doubt, she agreed and released him. I love you, Sorin. I love you too, Annie. Tell me everything. All the details. You really should sleep. You're getting married tomorrow. I'll be fine. I want to know, she said, shifting to sit next to him properly, feet dangling off the side of the bed. He smiled. Okay. Everything, huh? She leaned into him. Everything. Chapter 32. I had stopped paying attention to the people who delivered our food. Now that we weren't telling the story anymore, but merely fun anecdotes and even legends, we didn't bother to pause when they came by. Therefore, I only vaguely registered that it was a new person and kept right on listening to Stella's story. Dave was the one who let out the gasp as the man straightened after pushing the food tray through the slot. You look like Jay! At that, our heads came up. I got one good look at the man's startled expression, and my brain screeched to a halt. No, Jay breathed, scrambling to his feet. It's not possible. The man took a step back, eyes wide. Who? He started. Bry, get a move on it. Everyone should be fed by now, someone yelled from down our corridor, sounding exasperated. He glanced that way, back at us, grabbed his cart, and hurried out of sight. Only then did my brain stutter back to life, and I spun on Jay. He's dead! And yet, that had unmistakably been Jay's brother, just with a nasty scar splitting his face. Jay just stared at me, obviously shaken to his core. Stella silently dished out the food and made sure we took ours. Only once we'd eaten, I didn't taste a bite, did she speak. He's working for the three, she said carefully. Which makes no sense. He would never. And he's been missing over a year, Stella pointed out. There is certainly something strange about it, I conceded. He didn't feel like Bry, but it explains Reese's interest in the nickname when I gave it. I sat back mulling that over. If Bry switched sides, Reese would know a lot more about us than he did, and he would be rubbing Bry in our faces. But if he was undercover, first, Bo would have told us he was alive, and second, he would have said something just now to tell us, Jay said. I nodded slowly. What other explanations are there? Stella asked. His undercover is more important than you? Dave tried, but I shook my head. He either would have gone out of his way to avoid us, or still said something, so we don't give him away. Plus, it'd be strange for him to use his real name in that case. We fell silent, pondering that. And the way the guard spoke to him, I added. If anyone had ever tried to speak to him that way, he would have kicked their ass, Jay said slowly. Yeah, something very strange is going on here. Stella looked between us. Do we think we'll get the chance to find out? I thought back to Bry's expression. That had been all wrong, too. I don't know, I said honestly. I guess it'll just depend on how things play out. She squeezed Jay's hand and nodded. My brother's alive, Jay said after a minute, in a stunned voice as it clearly began to sink in. There wasn't much to say like that, and we sat in silence, each of us thinking out this new revelation. I examined my feelings and found that, as glad as I was he was still alive, bearing no crazy revelations like a friendship with Reese, I felt nothing more than that. Whatever Brian and I once had, it was good and over. Eventually, Dave and Stella fell asleep, leaning against each other. Jay and I didn't. Sometime later, in the wee hours of the morning, I heard footsteps coming our way. I didn't look up, finally dozing, figuring it was the night guard, until they stopped outside our cell and remained there. I looked up to find Brighton Doll crouched just on the other side of the bars, staring past me. Barely moving, I peeked to find that his gaze was locked on Jay's. Bri reached out and put a hand on the bars. "Hi, James," he said softly. "Hi, Brighton." His eyes lit up, momentarily making him truly look like the man I'd known. "Is that my name?" Jay scooted forward to my side. "Yes, of course. Don't you remember?" He shook his head with a quick jerk. "No, not really. I'm sorry. Things have slowly come back to me in bits and bobs. I knew I had a brother, but I couldn't remember anything else until I saw you earlier. Even now, I know there's a lot missing." He touched the scar that ran from the middle of his forehead down perilously close to his left eye and across his cheek. "Kira's told me the little she knows, that I lost my memory when I got the scar, and that I'd worked for the Freedom Fighters before the Battle of Deepin's Crossing. I still remember most of the kind of things you learned in school, or else Kira's helped me get it back." Jay tentatively put his hand over Bry's. "I'm just glad you're alive." His brother smiled. "Who's Kira?" I asked softly. His eyes darted to me. There was barely even a hint of recognition, which hurt a little, but I pushed it aside. It made sense he would remember Jay and not me. Jay had been a staple in his life for the vast majority of it. I was just a blip on the timeline. He squinted. We were friends?" he said slowly. "Jay named too," he added after a minute, looking excited. "Jez," I said with a nod. He grinned. "Kira's the best. My girlfriend. She kept me out of jail for being a freedom fighter. Not that I remember being one, but I was marked that way when they brought me in, so she knew." He eyed me again. "You and James shouldn't be together, right?" "We should be now," Jay said dryly, "but I joined the freedom fighters after I got word you died, and got to know Jez and your other friends, so no, in your memory, we shouldn't." "Oh," he breathed. "Oh, I don't think I wanted you to do that." Jay pressed his lips together, but he mostly steered clear of his own bitterness in the face of the amnesia. "No, you didn't, but when you were dead, you didn't get a choice anymore. Do you remember what they did to our parents?" "They're dead," he said promptly. "I remember that." His brow furrowed. "But I don't remember why. Is that why I was a freedom fighter? Because of our parents?" Jay nodded. "They got caught in the middle of a tariff dispute and were murdered." Bry squinted, absorbing all of that. He searched his brain. "Bo know that you're here? That's the name, right?" "It is, and we assume so, considering all the facts," Jay said. "Do you have a plan to get out?" "No, but Jesse and Rye should be here soon, and we figure they'll come up with something." "Jesse and Rye," he repeated. "I know those names. They're freedom fighters, too. And friends?" "Yes." He frowned. "Kira's brother and his best friend do work for the freedom fighters. His best friend is one of the messengers here. I tell him things when I see stuff here. Kira does too. At the inn where she works, just over there." He gestured. "I can see if they'll help. Maybe they'll know where Jesse and Rye are too." "We would really appreciate that. Can you come by to see us without suspicion?" He nodded. "I'm on food duty for the next week. Bob, who usually has your part, had to have a minor surgery and is out, so I'll see you at dinner times." "Good. Be careful, okay?" Jay said. "I always am, James." "Jay," he corrected. "Jay," Bri repeated. "Why?" He shrugged. "Didn't seem right to still be James or Jim without you." "Jay," he said one more time, like he was tasting it before nodding approval. "I like it." "Bri, what is taking you so long?" someone yelled from elsewhere in the jail. "Get moving." He flinched. "Told them I'd forgotten something," he said. "I'd better go." Jay squeezed his hand. "We'll see you tomorrow." He smiled, eyes lightening. "Okay, tomorrow," he said happily, and hurriedly straightened, vanishing from view. Jay and I watched him go, then simultaneously looked at each other. "Not what I was expecting," my friend said finally. "Me neither, although it explains how he can be alive but never came back." I also wasn't sure who he was talking about in regards to Kira's brother and her best friend. The only other people we had in Greensword, as far as I knew, were Call and his friend, who just signed things Call. That had to be them then. Call was a messenger. Seriously, it hurts to see him like that, so much that I couldn't get angry at him. "There'll be plenty of time for that later," I said, leaning back into my corner. Jay scooted back to his. "Thank the gods for that." Jessie worked slowly on her late meal, listening to Rye cover ground she'd already had 3 times since returning from her impromptu meeting with Jackson McGrose. Jessie wasn't sure she realized just how much of the story she'd told, since a little more slipped out each time as Rye tried to puzzle it through. Jessie let her mostly without comment. Her friend needed to figure out what most of that had meant without interference. Instead, she half-watched the coming and going of the inn's clientele. She almost missed the man sidle into the common room and make his way to the bar. She might have if Kira's face hadn't broken into the widest, pure smile she had yet to see on the other woman's face as she hurried over to greet him. Jessie stared, something in the man's stance seeming strangely familiar. With the inn as packed as it was, she couldn't get a good look at his profile, let alone his face. After a very brief conversation, Kira gestured towards the back with her head, and the man hurried that way. Kira paused to speak to Caroline, then followed him out. Jessie glanced at Rye, confusion gnawing at her, but Rye hadn't noticed, still attacking her food, face screwed up in thought. Jessie frowned, tapping the table. Why had there been something familiar about that man? Was it big gross? But then why Kira seemed excited? Her heart stuttered for an instant. Kira had a mysterious boyfriend named Bry, who apparently generally avoided the inn due to soldiers being jerks. Who else would she light up for? But there was no way Jessie knew Kira's Bry, because it was just impossible. Still, some bit of her was deeply unsurprised when, about 10 minutes later, Kira appeared at the table, smiling politely at the table of soldiers next to them. Hey, can I talk to you two for a minute in the back if you're done? Seems like we might need to change the schedule next week, she said. Her tone deceptively light, but her eyes were sparkling. The man had not emerged from the back yet. Even Rye seemed to pick up on there being something more going on, because she pushed her mostly eaten plate away. Sure, Jessie nodded, standing too. Kira led them to the tables and out the back door to the hall. She bypassed the stairs, heading for a small storage area where the door was cracked open. She paused just outside the door, though, and turned to them. You'd better hope I'm right about you, because if I'm not, this will end badly for you both, she said flatly, but in a low voice. Then, before Jessie could even really process that, she pushed the door open. There were 2 lit lanterns in the room, both sitting on barrels along one side. On the barrel between them sat a man. Jessie stared, jaw slacked. Although her mind had made the connection, it was not easy to see an impossibility sitting right in front of her. Rye made a choking noise, eyes all but bursting, as Kira silently shut the door behind them. Bright and Doll stared back at them with only the slightest trace of recognition. You do know him, Kira said with satisfaction. Bry? Maybe? Did I know you when I knew Jez? He asked. Are you freedom fighters? Oh, are you Jessie and Rye? Very slowly, Jessie felt herself nod. How? Rye breathed. I was a nurse in the town nearest Deepen's Crossing, Kira said, leaning against the door as if to fully make sure no one could interrupt. All the wounded from the battle were brought in there. Bry was one of a handful of freedom fighters brought in, and one of only a couple who survived. We hit it off, so I smuggled him out under the guise of taking care of him at home, and as soon as he was well enough, we moved to Greensward, where it was large enough for us to get lost. Except you took a job at the jail? Rye said, half directing it at Bry. I know. Doesn't make much sense, I guess, Bry said with a self-deprecating smile, but I thought I could do good and keep an ear on things. Kira's brother helps the freedom fighters. Everything I hear we pass along to him and his friend. I'm sorry I don't remember you, really. But you know who we are. Because I talked to Jez and James. I mean, Jay. He explained his conversation with them. So you still don't remember much. More than I did? A lot of my childhood is clearer. To be honest, I think I'm pretty clear up to joining the freedom fighters, he said, with a note of apology. I suppose it would make sense that your most recent memories would be the last things to come back, Jessie said. How did Jay and Jez look? A little beat up, but not bad. I'm hoping to meet their cellmates tomorrow, but they were either asleep tonight or pretending it. They have cellmates. He nodded. A young woman and a boy, maybe 10, 11 years old. I don't know their full story, but they're there because of some connection to the freedom fighters, too. I'll try and find out more tomorrow. He leaned forward with some of his classic intensity. We have to get them out. Rye snorted. Of course we do. Why do you think we're staying here? Really good luck? Kira asked dryly. Jessie took a step towards Bry. I know you don't remember me, but can I give you a hug? Hugs from friends, even forgotten ones, are always appreciated, he said with a tentative smile and slid off the barrel. She hugged him tightly, breathing in his familiar scent. Gods, I'm so glad you're alive. I'm glad to be alive and free, he said, and I'm really glad I got my shift changed at the jail, so I saw James, Jay, and could start putting the pieces together. This is the most progress he's made since very early on, Kira said. We wanted to be careful, so we struggled with whether or not to have Colin say anything in his messages. Colin? Oh, right. You might know him as Col. He's a messenger for the freedom fighters, done a lot of setting up of the network around here. Jessie, of course, knew of Col. How do you know Col? He's my brother's best friend. My brother, Ben, can be a little scattered sometimes, so when Colin's out gathering information, Bry and I keep an eye on him. I know we need backstory, but can we get on with the rescue mission? Bry said with a hint of a whine in his voice. Jessie shoved him gently in the shoulder. He grinned. Do you have a plan yet? We need another week to 2 weeks to finish our part of the master plan, but we're thinking the same night we do that would be the best night to break them out. Rye flashed a smile. We figure they'll be suitably distracted by our actions. Well, now you can do the two things simultaneously, Kira said after catching Bry's eye and getting a confirming nod. We'll be helping. Jessie wasn't going to argue. They knew Greensward better than she and Rye did. Plus, it was Brayton, even a Bry without all his memories. He wouldn't betray Jay if nothing else. And it was obvious that Kira wouldn't betray Bry at this point. Do you know how to use weapons? Bry, do you remember? Jessie asked. I haven't tried, but I think I can. Muscle memory like that doesn't seem to have left me, but I can start practicing at the apartment, or maybe Ben and Colin's space. It's got a bit more open area. I've had training most of my life on various weapons. I'm probably a little rusty, but I can be ready in that time frame, Kira added. What do you want us to do? Bry asked. I'll probably be most helpful in getting you into the jail. I won't deny that, Jessie agreed and set herself down on a barrel near him. I don't suppose either of you know a way to get to the palace. Kira leaned against the wall. Not me. I avoid it in all other official military areas. Jessie studied her. The way she said that implied there was a reason for avoidance, but if they still hadn't figured out Bry was the man they'd saved from Deepin's Crossing, they wouldn't know she was a nurse who'd spirited him away. Still, she filed that away for future reference. Bry shook his head. Can we ask why? Rye looked to Jessie, clearly thinking they could and should trust the pair. Jessie remembered the way Kira protected them from Reese's questions, and all the little things she'd done since. Sure, 4 minds are better than 2, she said easily. Bry's smile could have lit the room, and even Kira couldn't hide the fact she brightened. Riley grinned, mind clearly off Jackson McRose finally, and started explaining their job. The wedding would not happen until the afternoon, so Annie spent the morning anxiously pacing her room and double-checking on preparations. She also attempted to make a break to Wren's room multiple times. Sorin, who was bouncing between the increasingly flustered bride and groom, managed to cut her off at the pass each time. It might be a forced wedding, but you and Wren mean it, which means he can't see you before the wedding itself, and vice versa. It's bad luck. She gave him an impatient look. Sunshine, our wedding is already one big pile of bad luck. Me seeing Rennie will not make it any worse. But maybe you not seeing him will make it better in the long run. Annie growled quietly. Sorin, why are you taking this so seriously? There isn't going to be a long run if your predictions are correct. Because you love him, and I love you, and you deserve to have this go properly. Come on, Annie. She heaved a loud sigh before turning and flouncing back to her room. Finally, and none too soon, they were in the audience chamber. Wren stood in front of the throne, Sorin to his left. Vladimir had claimed as oldest that he had the right to walk Annie in. Sorin hadn't fought him. Wren needed someone to stand with him, and other than Annie, Sorin was probably the closest to a friend the man had. Breathe, Wren, he murmured. I am, he shot back, but kept his voice low too. They lapsed back into silence, half listening to the crowd of about 50, a mix of nobles and soldiers who talked quietly. Am I officially the king? Well, Sorin had half expected this question at least a couple weeks before. He had not expected it now. Officially? I suppose not. The ceremony has never been performed. Are you ever going to? That was an interesting question. I don't know, he said honestly. I suppose at some point people will ask and will have to. Vladimir will be resistant for the obvious reasons. So that will make Annie a princess. Sorin nodded. Okay. If he had been planning on saying more, the start of the music and Annie and Vladimir's appearance cut him off. Sorin snuck a glance at Wren to find a genuine smile spread across his face. Annie looked radiant in a simple white dress that fell artfully off her shoulders. She positively beamed. Vladimir passed her to Wren, managing to keep an even expression. The prince offered his arm and stepped up to the officiant. The man cleared his throat and began to work his way through the necessary steps of the ceremony. Sorin listened with half an ear, recalling his own wedding day, and scanned the crowd with the rest of his attention. He felt a momentary foreboding when he realized no one from Greensward was there. More importantly, Jackson wasn't, and Sorin hadn't thought anything on earth could or would keep him away. The young man was family in all but name. What was going on in Greensward that would keep them away? His mind was so focused on that, he almost missed the vows. His brother, nervous of what either of them might say, had not allowed the pair to write their own. The officiant stuck to the traditional oath. Do you, Rainier Highcastle, take this woman to be your wife, to love, stand beside, and cherish for all time? There was a pause, long enough for Vladimir to step forward threateningly. He stopped dead, though, at the coldest look Sorin had ever seen Wren favor someone with, and that was saying something, all things considered. I do, Wren said, voice clear, head held high as he kept his gaze locked, full of challenge, on Vladimir. The officiant shifted anxiously and barreled on. Do you, Anika Opland, take this man to be your husband, to love, stand beside, and cherish for all time? Reaching up to turn Wren's face back to hers, she smiled. I do. Very well, Mr. Dacamar, I believe you have the rings. It took a second for that to sink in, because he was so intent on his brother. Yes, of course. He stepped forward and offered them. You may now exchange rings. He waited a beat as they did. I officially pronounce you husband and wife. Congratulations! You may kiss the bride. Wren's smile widened, and he kissed her with a gusto, adding a slight dip for effect. Annie giggled. Sorin didn't miss the dark look that flickered across Vladimir's face, though, and he had a feeling Wren didn't either. Those in attendance stood and clapped politely as, first Vladimir, and then Sorin hugged Annie. Vladimir's eyes never deviated from Ren. After Sorin had spilled about his son that morning, Annie explained her nightmare. Watching this, he resolved to keep a closer eye on Vladimir as Annie and Ren politely accepted the congratulations of the various attendees. His brother led the way out, the others followed promptly, probably looking forward more to the party than the slightly strange wedding. Finally, only Sorin, Annie, and Ren remained. "Congratulations," Sorin said quietly. "Thank you," Ren replied with a slight smile. "Of course. Just be careful, okay? Especially you, Ren." "I will be." "Think we can skip the party for a while?" Annie asked, threading her arm through Ren's and leaning against him. "I think after Vladimir's behavior, you could skip the entire thing if you want." She smiled. "I love you, Sunshine. Love you too. Come on, Rennie, let's go celebrate out in the ramparts." "I can get behind that," he said, kissing her cheek and guiding her out of the room. Sorin stood when they left him, one clear thought swirling around his head. One way or another, it would all be over soon. Until then, though, one thing needed to be made clear. Sorin left the room, tracking down Calip, who somehow knew that Vladimir had headed for the uppermost balcony, on the opposite side of the castle from the newlyweds. Sorin aimed an absent thank you at him and followed. Finally, after too many stairs, he pushed open a door to find his brother pacing and muttering to himself. "I don't know what you're planning, but don't do it," Sorin said without preamble, although he kept his tone mild. Vladimir whirled at him. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I don't? According to who?" Sorin couldn't help the surge of anger that slipped into his voice. "You don't," he said firmly, "so leave it alone." "I don't think I shall." He smirked, although he only felt a pit in his stomach. "Sorin," he threatened, eyes narrowing. "Don't. You do not get to pull that shit." Vladimir stepped closely, as if he was trying to use his slight height advantage. "Do not presume to talk about things you do not understand." It felt just like talking to Edward, only worse. "Things I don't understand," he forced to laugh. "I understand far more than you seem to think I do. Maybe even more than you, Vlad." Vladimir snorted and started to turn away dismissively. "Don't talk back." Like a rising tide, Sorin's anger snapped for the first time in 10 years. For the first time since he'd been pushed too far and reacted, punching Edward in the face and storming from the house. Before he thought his actions through, he took 2 quick steps forward, grabbing Vladimir by the shirt collar. He used his anger and momentum to spin him around and slam him back against the wall. "Don't ever say that again," he growled, face scant inches from his brother. "First, you clearly have no idea what I do or do not understand. Second, does it even register that this is Edward talking and not you? Third, you need to step back and stop before you do something irreversible. Do you understand?" "Yes," Vlad muttered moodily. Sorin knew he was temporarily cowed, maybe only stunned by the physical impact, but not down yet. Still, he let go and stepped back. Vlad was his brother, still family despite recent tendencies, and even that much violence towards anyone, let alone family, made Sorin's hands shake as the anger ebbed. "Good. Leave Ren alone." "How many times do I have to tell you?" Vlad said, straightening, but a lot of the condensation was gone. "You don't give orders." Sorin offered a half smile. "Don't fool yourself, lad. There are few who would take your word over mine anymore." That in of itself was strange to contemplate, but Sorin didn't doubt it was ultimately true. People who worked in the castle were neither blind nor stupid, although Sorin might have classified them all as grossly misguided. They saw the changing tides. But that's not the important part. Yet. What is important is that you stay away from Rainier if you can't handle yourself around him. Why are you trying so hard to protect him? He stepped away from the wall, almost seeming afraid that Sorin might shove him into it again. It's not him I'm protecting. Although perhaps that had at one point been true. Now, Sorin admitted only to himself, that might not be so true. Vladimir stared at him before understanding dawned. "Anika, why?" "I am protecting Annie because you're currently plotting how to murder her husband." He visibly started at Ren's new title. Sorin smiled coldly. "Annie has been beyond loyal from the start, despite what we dragged her into. The least you can do is let her be happy. For a few months, at least, before we'll have to send Annie away if she's to survive the coming battles." "She's gotten her fair share of positive things out of this," Vladimir shot back. "Yes, that would be Ren. Or are you really too blind to see it? Rainier isn't important. If you think that, you're fooling yourself on a lot of levels. If nothing else, he's important to her sister, and therefore important to me, and he should be to you as well. I'll kill him if I want to." The comment was barely thought out, just a posturing reaction to Sorin standing up to him, but it still carried weight. Sorin caught his eye. "You will not touch him. Do whatever you want otherwise. I no longer care, but you will leave our brother-in-law alone or face the consequences." "You would never hurt one of your siblings," Vladimir scoffed, voice laced with confidence. He held his gaze until Vladimir broke first. "Try me," he said softly, and then turned and let himself back into the castle.